The stories contained in this podcast are the recollections of the guests we've invited onto the show. We are an outlet for people to share their truths, and we accept no legal responsibilities for the stories contained herein.
I'm Kendra Sheets.
And I'm Rich Gill.
And this is Enough, a podcast that aims to shine light into the darkened corners of the music industry while discussing the ways we can and should improve ourselves and, in turn, our community. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Subtext, our information-driven subset of Enough. Today, we'll be continuing our series of taking a look at people in the entertainment industry who have allegations against them for problematic behavior, be it assault, harassment, rape, or abuse. Today's subject is a little different than the others we've covered in the fact that, aside from a couple singles released over a decade ago, he's not really a well-known musician by any sorts. He's known for dating singers, though, specifically young ones. So you probably know him best from the 7 years that he spent on That 70s Show, or maybe from the 8 years that he spent recently on NCIS. Today, we're talking about Wilmer Valderrama.
I had no idea that he actually put out 2 singles at one point. That was total news to me.
I feel like every actor around that time frame ended up trying to dabble into music in some way, and it just turned out absolute shit.
So, as we usually do, before we get into the specifics of Valderrama's allegations, let's give a very brief overview of his time on That 70s Show, since that is what really put him in the public view. Aside from launching the careers of its young leads at the time, Ashton Kutcher, Mila Kunis, Laura Prepon, Topher Grace, and Danny Masterson, along with Valderrama, the show also had its share of controversies come to light over the years, specifically the problematic way it depicted Valderrama's foreign exchange student character named Fez, which stands for foreign exchange student, and Kunis's character of Jack.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
I had never picked up on that.
Yeah.
That's really shitty.
I think they said what his actual name was at the end of the series.
Oh, that sucks. I had no idea.
Yeah, not great.
All right. Go on.
Speaking of Kunis's character of Jackie, there's also the way Kunis herself was treated on the set, as she was the youngest of all the young stars. She had actually lied about her age to get on the show and said she was 15 when she was actually 14.
And she was actually one of the only ones who was playing the character of the correct age. Everyone else was 20s, totally. Playing down to teens, right?
Yeah, absolutely. During a 2002 interview on The Rosie O'Donnell Show, Kunis recounted her first days on the set as a young teenage actor. One scene in particular called for a kiss between her and co-star Ashton Kutcher. As Kunis said, quote, "I never kissed a guy. I was a 14-year-old little girl, and I was extremely scared for my life." Danny Masterson goes, "Dude, I'll give you," meaning Kutcher, $10 if you French kiss her, end quote. Kunis goes on to say, "I didn't let him. He never got his tongue in my mouth." According to Kutcher, he thought Kunis was 15 at the time, saying, "There's a big difference. That 1 year makes the world of change." Does it, Ashton? Does the 1 year between 14 and 15 make a huge difference?
I've been listening to a lot of Chris Hansen's podcast, Predators I've Caught, and they talk about this a lot on there, where they say things like, the guys will come in, right? They'll be chatting with someone who says, the decoy says she's 13. And then the guys come in, they're 42, 35, whatever it is. They play down their age, so they're 27, talking to what they say is a 15-year-old. That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You're still 27, 30, 40 years old talking to someone who's 13, 14, 15. It's not night and day difference here. It's a couple of years.
Yeah. Now, a difference between a 14-year-old and a 19-year-old, okay. But we're talking about 14, 15, 13, come on. And especially when, Kutcher was 19 at the time. Masterson was 21. So
right.
Regardless of how old you thought she was, you're still trying to make out with someone who is developmentally quite a bit younger. Now, we already covered Masterson's conviction of 2 counts of rape back on episode 39, so we won't rehash all that, but feel free to go back and listen to that if you'd like to hear about that and the letters of support that Kunis and Kutcher wrote on Masterson's behalf.
So Wilmer Valderrama did not write a letter of support for Master of Sin, but that may be because he has his own history of problematic behavior when it comes to his relationships. We can start back in 2000 when a then 20-year-old Valderrama started a 2-year relationship with a 16-year-old Mandy Moore, although the two had met at a photo shoot a year earlier when Mandy Moore was 15 years old. During a 2006 Howard Stern interview, Valderrama claims that he took Mandy Moore's virginity and, quote, "The sex with Mandy was good, but it wasn't like warm apple pie." What? Like, ew, dude, what the fuck?
So gross.
I mean, okay, I like, very rarely am I left speechless, but there's like 95 things I could say and none of them are coming out right. It's just going to be a string of obscenity, so let me keep going.
Well, and I understand it's Howard Stern, and especially that era of Howard Stern, it was like big shock jock radio stuff. But dude, come on, even that is just like pretty
gross.
Fucking disgusting.
It's gross. You could say the same thing 10 different ways and not be that fucking vile about it.
Totally.
So Moore actually replied a few months later in an Elle magazine interview saying that Valderrama's comments were, quote, "utterly tacky, not even true, and it hurt my feelings because I like him," end quote. In her own Howard Stern interview in 2016, she clarified her statements even further by confirming that while, yes, they did date, they had never slept together, and that Valderrama had told her in private that he misspoke during the Stern interview.
Well, that makes it better. That's,
Yeah, apple pie right off the cuff, man. Fucking gross, dude.
Fast forward to 2004, when Valderrama started dating a freshly 18 Lindsey Lohan when he was 24, although reports from People magazine at the time say that the pair had been seen out in public months before she had turned 18. And while this doesn't necessarily mean anything untoward was happening at the time, it is a little suspect that they started dating right after she became of age. Which brings up one of the points we want to make with this. Just because something is legally okay doesn't make it morally okay. And we're not trying to police morals, but let's think about this stuff a little bit. Yes, someone in their 20s dating an 18-year-old is technically legal, and I'm talking late 20s. But there is a world of growing up and life experience that happens between the ages of 17 and 24, which is what this situation was. The argument can be made that people who are working in the entertainment industry, especially ones like Lohan, who started very young, the argument can be made that they mature faster because they're working with adults and in some cases supporting their family financially. But they're still fucking teenagers. They're children. That whole mature for your age argument is also something groomers say pretty regularly when they're preying on literal children, which, is pretty fucking vile and disgusting.
Which brings us to Demi Lovato, perhaps the most well-known of Valderrama's exes, partially due to a song that Lovato put out in 2022 called 29. The two initially met in January of 2010 at a census form photo shoot. This fucking guy and his photo shoots, am I right? At this photo shoot when Lovato was 17. As Lovato said in an interview with Mamas Latinas, quote, "I only did the photo shoot because I heard it was at his house and I thought he was really cute. I didn't really care about the census forms. But when I met him and I laid eyes on him for the first time, I was in hair and makeup and he came and sat down. I was like, I love this man and I have to have him," end quote. While Lovato hasn't outright said that the song is about Valderrama, lyrics like, "Finally 29, funny, just like you were at the time. Thought it was a teenage dream, just a fantasy. But was it yours or was it mine? 1729. Makes it pretty clear what it's about. And while Lovato hasn't outright confirmed it, they did tell Zane Lowe, "I feel like the song says it all," in a 2022 interview.
Lovato and Valderrama were together for 6 years, and while, just like Lohan, they didn't technically start dating until Lovato was 18, it's not too hard to read between the lines and see that the relationship started before that. In a Howard Stern interview, once again,
I
will say this about Howard Stern. He gets people to say everything.
He's got his finger on the pulse. If we get him to help track down some of these situations,
oh my God,
he's the common thread.
Howard Stern is like, if you read Playboy interviews from the 70s and 80s, like People said stuff in those interviews that they would never say anywhere else. It's amazing. So in this Howard Stern interview, Lovato talks about her teenage years and the attention she sought from older men, saying, quote, "For me, I was a teenager, and so to me, that's gross. If you are 50 and 60, you're fine. Even 30 and 40, that's not gross at all. But I think that when you're in those development years, you should absolutely not be with somebody that is older than you by that much. It's just unhealthy and toxic," end quote. And that's the big point of this entire conversation. It's not so much about Valderrama and his dating history. It's this conversation of older people dating or preying on younger people. As we said earlier, people use the excuse that it's Hollywood, or it's the entertainment industry, or it's the music industry, or it's punk rock. So people mature faster. They enter into business relationships with adults. But that doesn't mean they should be in physical relationships with adults, especially when they're underage. If you are in an industry that employs young people or are around young people, you should consider it your responsibility to keep them safe, not prey on them. Same goes for 27-year-old Tyga and 16-year-old Kylie Jenner, or 30-year-old Tim Armstrong and 16-year-old Brody Dahl.
Someone said it. Someone finally said it.
2 other cases of older men who waited until people turned 18 before dating them. It's just long overdue for these conversations to take place.
Ultimately, nothing will probably happen with Valderrama. He's in a relationship now and has a child and has never really been pushed on his predilection for younger women and for girls. A lot of people have just looked the other way. I mean, as most people do in Hollywood and the music industry, as we've talked about before. And despite a number of articles coming out about this topic, the mainstream media has mostly just stayed away from it. These are the type of things that a lot of people and outlets just don't want to touch. But like Rich had said, it's high time we start seriously looking at the men in these industries who have spent their careers preying on young people. Not to stray too far away from Valderrama's story, but maybe with the arrest of Diddy and the conversation about how unprotected Justin Bieber was as a young teenager, maybe the tide can finally start turning again. Ultimately, that's what this entire thing is about. The point of these subtext episodes isn't necessarily to highlight individuals who are problematic or predatory or outright criminals, although that is kind of part of it. The main reason is to highlight a culture where all of this stuff is allowed and has been allowed and is allowed to continue to happen. And to talk about the ways that we can change that, not as individuals, but as a community, as a culture, as a society that has taken it upon each other to look out for each other.
Enough is a podcast centering on surviving abuse, harassment, and assault in the music scene. To help get the word out, please like and subscribe and share with your friends. If you have been on the receiving end of harm from someone, be it artist, venue owner, booking agent, audience member, or someone else, and would like to share your story on a future episode, please reach out to us at thisisenoughpodcast@gmail.com. All correspondences are kept confidential.